All right, Philippe, my friend, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
Of course, this is my blurry background. I'm doing all things with bees today. Brain, blurry backgrounds, just terrific alliteration. So
Yeah.
I swear
Well,
I'll.
you look good. You look
Thank you,
good.
thank
So,
you. I swear I'll fix it next time. But hey, man, thanks for doing this. This is for those of you watching. This is Dr. Philippe Dion, neurologist. He'll give you his full background. But we met in real life, IRL, pre-pandemic, and I was just taken with his knowledge and his commitment to his work. And I said, "Wow, how many times do I get to meet a neurologist and that I actually understand what he or she is saying? Let me go for this." And we've gotten a little closer. We've decided to just do these videos, and basically I'm gonna ask all these questions. I'm gonna ask basic questions that you've always wanted to know about your brain, right? I don't see too many crazy resources out there, and I think we can make it pretty easily digestible to people. So thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it.
well, thank you. I'm looking forward to this. I think this could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I like it. Fun is good.
Answering, yeah, answering questions spontaneously, anything
Yes.
that comes to mind.
Yes, be careful what you
You know,
wish for.
yeah. I know. If you see me take a drink of water, that's because I need some time to think.
Think good, smart. That's a brain trick 101. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, tell me or anybody watching, like, who are you? How did you get involved in neurology? What does that mean to be a neurologist? How is it different than a neuroscientist? I mean, all that basic stuff, you know?
Yeah. So my name is Dr. Philippe Dion. I'm a board certified neurologist. My subspecialty is epilepsy. I did my neurology residency at NYU and then fellowship in clinical neurophysiology at New York Presbyterian Cornell, which just means that I'm able to read the electrical activity that's being put out by the entire central nervous system, so brain, spinal cord, and nerves. I spent about five and a half years in private practice as an epilepsy specialist, and then I created my my health and wellness company, the Inley Brain Fit Institute.
Right.
Created an app, which is a game called Dr. Dion's Brain Fit that teaches people about how food and exercise impacts their brain. Wrote a book called Neuroplasticity, Your Brain's Superpower, about how the brain adapts, learns, and heals. And now, about to launch my online course, Take Charge of Your Brain in 30 Days.
So you're a slacker, pretty much.
Yeah, you just laying around doing nothing.
Oh my God, that's incredible. I've actually played your game. It was really good. It's kind of like Tetris with different levels, right? Or some version of Tetris, right? With different brain, unlocking different brain things. I kind of like the gamification of it.
Yeah, games allow us to learn, and games influence our behavior, right? And when you take something like neurology and things that have to do with the brain, for a lot of people, it can be a little bit overwhelming because they think it has to be really, really complicated, and it doesn't have to be. And so a game allows you to meet people where they're at so that they learn about the brain. And more importantly, they learn about how the things that they do every single day influences how their brain evolves. And I think that's really empowering for people.
Good. Well, let's get into it. So now I have all my good questions about things that I've always wanted to know about the brain. So I thought about this. I was like, where's a good place to start on all this? And it's probably something like at the basics. This is Sound of Music, right? Start at the very beginning. So maybe, and you're going to probably tell me there's a reason that music, you remember that song. I'm second guessing everything. But like, how big is the brain? What does it do? Like, what makes up the brain? I think I could repeat some words: cerebellum, medulla oblongata, and brainstem, but if pressed on a Jeopardy question, as we were talking offline, I would fail. I'd be like, I don't know what they're functioning, and I have all this power sitting above my shoulders, really, and we always say we use 10% of our brains. Like, is that a myth? Maybe get into what does that even mean? Is there like another 90% that's waiting for me to eat? Level up and find some kiwi in a rainforest to eat, and then all of a sudden so just some of the basics would be helpful, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so let me start with your first question. So the brain actually weighs about 3 pounds.
Okay.
Right. So for most of us, that's going to be about 2% of our body weight. Right. And even though it's only 2% of our body weight, it consumes 20% of our body's energy, 20% of the body's blood flow. If you're a baby, because everything is so brand new to them, and their brain is just constantly working to process all that new information, it can be as high as 60% of the body's energy and blood flow that they're consuming at any given time. 80% of our genes encode for the brain. And every other organ in the body is there to serve the brain in some way, right? So your kidneys and your liver take the toxins out of the body that if those accumulate too high, that has a really negative impact on the brain. Your heart pumps blood to the brain. Your lungs take in oxygen so that your heart can deliver them to the brain, because your brain needs oxygen and nutrients in order to survive. So every organ is there to serve the brain in some way. And, your brain is actually pretty complicated, right? When we break the brain down, we can actually break it down into 3 kind of major structures.
Okay, good. I like threes. I like things in threes. This is helpful. So your brain in 3 things. Got it.
Brain in 3 things, right?
Okay.
So it's your cerebral hemispheres, or the other way to think about it is your neocortex. That's the newer part of the brain. Right?
Okay.
That's all up in here.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Then you have your cerebellum, which is back here. That's responsible for a lot of fine motor movements. So if doctors ask you to do things like this, right, that's what allows you to coordinate the movement, is the cerebellum.
So
and then you've got
people, if you're taking road tests, if you're taking things, if a police officer asks you to do this, blame your cerebellum if you're off balance, okay?
Yeah, no, and that's exactly right, because your cerebellum gets affected by alcohol before any other part of your brain.
Got it. Okay.
Right?
So we can. That's another episode. Your brain on alcohol. I'm sure that's coming.
And then your brainstem, which is made up of your pons and your medulla, and that has a lot of your vital functions in it, like heart rate, respiratory rate, right? And so you can break your brain down into those 3 components.
Okay.
If you want to get deeper, we can certainly break it down into a lot more components. You got to think about it in those 3 ways.
Start with those 3 ways. That's good.
Yeah, and so the brain has evolved in this structure for a very particular reason. And actually, your brainstem is the oldest part of your brain, right? And then followed by your midbrain, your cerebellum.
And when we say brainstem, how far down does the stem go? And when I think of stem, I think of obviously like a tree with a root, or is it attaching itself to my spinal cord? Or like when we say stem, because I can picture the cerebellum being like this small ball back here, and then the rest of this stuff is the brain, what I would think of. But talk to me about the stem. So your brainstem is actually where your brain itself turns into the spinal cord. Okay. So it's all connected, right? So all the fibers up here in your neocortex, in your cerebral hemisphere, right? For them to go down into your body, they all have to go through your brainstem for them to essentially turn into your spinal cord and then break off into your nerves. Whoa. So your brainstem is really high real estate territory. Like you do not want to injure that part of your brain. This is why traumatic neck and those injuries are so devastating.
Absolutely.
Yeah, got it. Okay, so we have the 3 parts. I'd asked about this 10% of the brain thing. I hear that so much. So what does that mean? When somebody says, and where did that come from? Is that like in the land of fake statistics, right? Nobody knows what does we only use 10% of our brain actually mean? Is that just made up? Is that somebody out of a hat that said 10%, or is it studied? And what does that mean? And when we say using, what does that mean? We're using, and does the other 90% use that same stuff, or can we start talking telekinesis? Like, when can I levitate, basically?
So you want to know when you can fly?
I want to know when I can fly and like read. I want to
objects with your mind.
Yes, exactly. When am I become an X-Men?
All right, so you might be a little disappointed because this idea that we only use 10% of our brain, definitely is in the land of misinformation.
Right? So it's misinformation. So that's just not true.
Right.
Okay.
Right? So the brain is this really complicated network where everything is sort of connected to each other.
Okay.
And even if you move like your left hand, right, and you say, oh, well, your left hand is controlled by the right side of your brain and in this particular area. Yeah. Well, maybe, but the network is really, really complicated, and all these neurons are connected to each other via things like axons and dendrites. And so to move your hand takes a lot of coordination, right? It not only takes the planning to move your hand in your frontal lobe and in the front part of your brain. It takes the part of your frontal lobe that's responsible for your arm. It takes your basal ganglia It takes your cerebellum because you're coordinating that movement.
Yeah. Oh,
So
okay. Got
so
it.
so it takes a lot more than just 10% of your brain.
So where did that come from? I mean, what does that mean then?
I read where it comes from. I cannot remember right now
Yeah.
exactly where that comes
I'll look
from,
it up. We'll
but
table it.
I will look it up and I will get back to you
Okay.
on that.
So we
Yeah.
talked about the three parts of the brain. We said
Yep.
the hemisphere here, and because you mentioned right and left brain. That's another one that we hear a lot. So you did this, then you said cerebellum controlling, maybe like motor function, and then brainstem that connects us to the rest of our system. When somebody says right brain, left brain, that's part of the hemisphere, right? And is it really that delineated if everything is connected? Can you just talk a little bit about right brain, left brain, like in layman's terms, like what kind of what that means and how we deal with it daily?
Yeah, so the left and right side of your brains actually have like this space in between them,
Right. I've seen
right?
on, when they have brains on, movies, right? They're kind
Yep,
of break it apart in a big, massive petri dish or something. And it's like, look
right.
at this inside, of the brain here, right?
Yeah, so there's this space in between them, and in the middle there's this bundle of fibers, your corpus callosum, that connects them, right?
Corpus
But here's
callosum.
the
That's
thing
a
from
corpus callosum. I haven't. That's a great high school biology word.
Yeah. So here's the thing though, for most people, especially most people that are right-handed,
Yeah.
they are going to be left hemisphere dominant, meaning that memory and language will be dominant on the left side of their brain, right? And
Hmm.
so if you injure the left side of the brain that's responsible for language, then people have much more of a difficult time expressing themselves
Mm-hmm.
as well as understanding language.
And you're really referring to the left side of your brain being the left side of your head. That is,
Correct.
so it's the left side of sometimes that's backwards, but when they say stage left and stage right, and you're
Yeah.
like, well, do you mean, and you go to the right side, you're like, well, I meant stage right means the left side of the stage if you're looking at it from the audience. But it's like,
Right.
I'm
Right.
saying it. So in this way, left hemisphere or left brain, it means the actual left side of the human, just right there.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
got
Now,
it.
if you're looking at it on a image like an MRI,
Uh-huh.
it's actually the way you just described, right? So,
Nope, I don't want to get
so
into that.
what's
We'll get.
right?
We'll come back.
but
Uh-huh.
but yeah. So I'm referring to the actual left side of your body, left side of your brain.
And it's that clear. It's almost like there's two societies or two camps, and they like cross over and hang out with each other, basically, and
Yeah.
do jobs together.
Right. So for most people, right, there are always exceptions and things are a little bit complicated, but most people will be dominant for language and memory on the left side. And we
Okay.
can actually test this. And I've tested this plenty of times when you're preparing somebody for possible surgery.
Mm.
And you take them in and you give them medication that actually shuts down one side of their brain. And then you test the side that's still awake
God.
for memory and language, right?
Wow.
And then you let that medication wear off and let them both sides of their brain wake up, and then you shut down the other side and you do the same thing.
I love that.
And so we've got ways of testing this. And so yes, for most people, they're going to be dominant for language and memory on the left side of their brain.
Okay. So and then on the right side of the brain. Now, so I'm going to say the left side is language, memory. The right side means being great at math and being rational, or is that it, or what?
Well, it's the more creative side.
Oh, really? More creative.
Yeah, more creative side.
So where
the
does
left side tends to be the more logical and
I think I was thinking left is writing and memory. That's more creative, but in this way, writing knowledge is on the left side. Like remembering things, whether it's in high school, right? You do your SATs. It's math and English are separate, right? You're either you can be great at both, but usually someone's better at one or the other. So all of that knowledge lives in the left hemisphere.
Yeah, but again, remember this stuff is complicated, right? This stuff is really connected, and so we make these distinctions, and to some extent they do play out like that in real life.
Yeah.
But everybody is different, right? So you take somebody who is left-handed, right? They may be.
I am left-handed. I am
Right. So
left-handed.
they may have actually co-dominance, meaning that language and memory
Mm-hmm.
is on both sides,
Right.
or they may be more dominant for language and memory on the right side. Right.
Okay.
So there's always exceptions to the rule.
And then right side is creativity. What more is associated typically with the right side of the brain?
So it's spatial recognition, it's being able to navigate your environment really
Ah,
well,
okay.
things of that nature.
Navigate like I don't walk into a wall.
Like navigate, like, you don't need directions to be able to find your way in a city.
Okay.
Right? Like you can use landmarks to
Yeah.
figure
Oh,
out where you're
I
going.
remember breadcrumbs. I remember
Right.
this sign. If I make a left on 43rd and 10th, I'm going east. I'm 43rd and 9th. Like I understand those
Correct.
concepts. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So now that we know like what it's made up of, like what other things are some of the basics that, like, if you go to the gym, right? If somebody goes to the gym, usually what do? They go, the trainer will say, you're going to do back, arms, chest, legs. Don't skip leg day, kids.
Right.
Do some cardio, and everybody understands that to go to the gym, that's the structure, right? But so what are some of the other things for the brain? Like we got the hemispheres, we have the left and a right. We have the three main areas. Like, what are some of the hits, as it were, the basics?
Well, look, I love the fact that you just brought up exercise, right?
Okay.
So our brain sort of evolved in a very specific way. So I said the cerebral hemispheres, or the neocortex, is the newest part of our brain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And so the brains that we have today are very different than the brains early humans had hundreds of thousands or millions of years ago.
When did our brain, because, we could talk about Neanderthal and like different, when did the brain as we know it of our versions of humans kind of come into existence? Like, when was this?
Yeah, so our brains have been evolving the entire time. And so
Okay.
when
Oh, really?
researchers,
Got it. Okay.
yeah, so when researchers look as to why that's the case, why did our brains evolve the way that it did? There was a researcher at Harvard and another researcher that found that the reason that our brains evolved the way that they did was human beings need to run long distances, right? So our need to move, our need to run, right? And so it kind of makes sense, right? Because early humans needed to be able to outrun their predators or be able to chase down their prey, right? And the parts of our brains that really developed really became more complicated, meaning that they got bigger, you developed a lot more neurons, a lot more connections, are the neocortex, the part of the brain responsible for thinking and reasoning, right? Because you want to be able to outthink your predators and your prey, right? It's the hippocampus, the part of the brain responsible for memory, because you want to be able to remember.
The hippocampus, I thought, was the part of your brain that is making you run away from hippos, or is that a different part of the?
That's completely different.
I know that's the fight or flight, but I feel like I feel like the hippocampus.
That's the land of Smith.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Misunderstanding.
Got it. So sorry, what is the hippocampus again?
So the part of the brain responsible for short-term memory.
Okay.
Right? And then the other part of the brain that really developed is the cerebellum, which again plays a role in our coordination of movement, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't want to, if you're running away from something, you don't want to trip and fall. You want your movements to be smooth and coordinated. So our brains evolved the way that they did, so that way we could run long distances. And when you think about that and sort of, think to yourself, well, how is that relevant from like a modern day human perspective? Yeah. Well, if we want our brains to continue to evolve, then we need to be moving.
Well, this is a good one. You mentioned this. So what is how like let's eat organic or have greens, or what are some of the things that the brain likes? Not just food wise, but like you mentioned movement. So does that means exercise? Does it mean long distance? Does it mean like what are some of the like how are the brains growing the best? Is it physical challenges, mental games, peace and quiet? I mean, I'm sure it's probably a little bit of everything, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so you need the movement, that's important, but you do need to challenge yourself, right? And so you need to learn new skills. You need to learn new languages. You need to have different conversations with different people. Having new experiences is incredibly important for the brain. And being creatures of habit, that's
Yes.
literally killing us.
Wow.
Like, we have to stop being creatures of habit, and we have to stop being sedentary, right? Being
Okay.
chronically stressed is really bad for the brain. That actually kills neurons.
Do you see a lot of people in your work that come and like, how does stress appear for them? Like, does their brain hurt, or does it come across as emotion, or what? Talk to me about stress, because
Yeah.
yeah.
So you just asked, does the brain hurt? So the brain itself has no pain receptors, right? So we can talk about that at some other time.
Really?
Yeah, no pain receptors, right?
Interesting.
And
Okay.
so it presents like a lot of different things, right? It could present like memory problems. It can present like depression. It can present like people that have had significant trauma and stress. It can present like having PTSD or having dissociative identity disorder, which some people know as multiple personalities. It can present as conversion disorders, which is people have neurological symptoms, but there's no structural changes in their brain or nervous system. It's their body's way of manifesting that stress.
So this is.
So I'll give you an example.
Yeah, please.
So a few years back, I was taking care of this guy who was in a pseudocoma, meaning so he was in a coma, but there was no structural reason for him to be in a coma, right? And he was like this for over a month. And essentially every test that we ran was completely normal. Well, it turned out that he had really pissed off the mob, and they wanted to kill him. That's
just the mob doing what the mob does, I'm sure. Yes.
And so, and he went into a pseudocoma. That was the impact that the stress had on him.
Probably saved his life, I would imagine, in the short term.
Yeah.
Better being in a pseudo coma than getting chased down by the mob. Oh my God. So you mentioned something about like PTSD and some of these, like you started to call out what are like identified as maybe like a brain disorder or something that I don't know if I'm using the right word there, but do you find when you explain, we've noticed your brain, because sometimes we might not know what's going on with us, and maybe if you say, Adam, we've studied your brain and you have high levels of XYZ, due to PTSD. Let me explain to you. Do you find that does the brain like knowing about what it's going through? In other words, do people like knowing, like, oh, good, that's what I have. Oh, that's what it is, and that helps them to maybe as opposed to just like medication or in collaboration with medications or something like that.
Yeah, so I'm going to answer it from the perspective of what the brain likes and what people may like, right?
Right.
So your brain is always searching for the right answer. Always. It's always searching for the truth.
Tell me about it, brother. I don't know.
But
it's exhausting.
Yeah, but here's the problem. And your brain always comes up with the right answer. Always.
Yeah.
But under every single circumstance, your brain will come up with the right answer. The problem lies that people feed it the wrong information. So it comes up with the right answer, but based on the wrong information, right?
Give me an example, maybe.
So if I put 2 + 2 in a calculator, it's going to give me 4.
Right.
Because the calculator will always give you the right answer, right?
Right.
Well, what if I try to do 2 + 2, but the button gets frozen? And now it's now it's getting the wrong information.
It's
going to give me the right answer, but based on the wrong information.
That's really interesting, because it's not that it's giving you the wrong answer. You've put, so the responsibility is either on yourself or what the inputs. Okay, I hadn't really thought about that then as clearly as that from a rational. Okay, that's really interesting.
And this is right, and this is why you can never convince somebody to essentially, if they've got an opinion that's completely different from yours, to try to convince them is going to be nearly impossible, right? Because they're always going to be able to find information to match whatever answer they want. There's always misinformation out there. There's plenty of it.
That is true.
So it's really about the information that you give your brain and the answer that it comes up with.
Okay.
Now, what people want to know in terms of, do they want to know what's going on with them?
Right.
Some people, yes. Some people don't want to. And sometimes part of the problem is you give people an answer, you give them a diagnosis, right? and essentially you're giving them a label. And
Right.
now they start acting like their label.
So I guess that's my question. Do you find that the labeling of something is more beneficial? That they say, "Thank you for helping me understand what I've been going through," or is it, yeah, like you said, is it just a flip of the coin, or it's so individualized, or maybe there's some studies on this I'm not aware
Yeah,
of.
so it's very much individualized. And I talk about this actually in my course where I'm like, do we actually do a disservice by giving you a diagnosis?
Interesting.
Right? Because if I say to you, oh, you've got type 2 diabetes,
Mm-hmm.
now are you going to start acting like somebody, whoever you think type 2 diabetes should be, what that person should be like and what they should eat, and right?
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to being like, look, this is what you need to do to get healthier, and not give you a diagnosis, right? But everybody's different. You give some people an answer if they really want an answer. They've been dealing with something for a long time. They want an answer. They love having an answer if they feel good about it, because it validates what they're going through.
Yeah.
They no longer feel like they're sort of crazy.
Well, I totally get it. How do we? You just said something that jogged my memory or my brain here on this. What getting an answer. How do we stay? What's like some basics or things to stay in the inquiry longer? I mean, we could have I think we should have a whole separate conversation about jumping to conclusions, confirmation biases, all
Yeah.
these things. But what is this? Just a couple of simple methods on, elongating the inquiry process before our pattern seeking, I have the right answer brain jumps in.
Yeah. And so I
Yeah.
think it all depends on the questions you ask yourself,
Okay.
right? And I think questions are incredibly powerful, especially when they help you get new information.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times people don't ask themselves questions that are revealing. So let's say if we'll use the example of somebody with a stroke. Let's say I have a stroke, right?
Okay.
So I don't know how many people ask themselves, well, why did I have the stroke? Did I have the stroke, right? So they may say, why
Mm.
did I have the stroke? Oh, well, the neurologist said it's because of my diabetes,
Okay.
right? Okay, then it's like, well, why do you have type 2 diabetes? Like, I don't know if they take it to that next level, right? Because then they could say, well, maybe I have type 2 diabetes because I'm overweight. Well, then why are you overweight? Well, maybe I'm overweight because I don't eat healthy and I don't exercise. Well, why don't you eat healthy and exercise, right? So to get to the root of the problem, you have to continuously ask yourself,
Why?
why?
It's interesting. I asked the question about inquiry, but the biggest inquiry question is why.
Yeah.
And that's really fantastic. I hope
And you have to
yeah.
be prepared that the why is because of you.
Yeah, it's going to could potentially be a little bit uncomfortable. Right.
Right. So, and the vast majority of the time, the why is because of you.
Mm-hmm.
And people would much rather take a pill than answer the question of why,
Well,
because why means that you are responsible and you have to change.
but Philippe, you're supposed to be the neurologist. I get this at a psychiatrist and a psychologist and all this. It's me. Aren't you supposed to tell me like, hey, here's something different. It's your brain's fault. Like, why can't I blame my brain?
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
this is the common, right? We would hear this from in a therapy or something,
Yeah.
and you'd try to talk it out. So how do you approach when you inevitably, I'm kidding, of course, when you inevitably have these conversations with people, how do you approach this from, what's the difference between, what's the difference between you approaching this as a neurologist from your other colleagues in, psychology or psychiatry?
Well, so medication doesn't cure the vast majority of diseases, right? I mean, it's about symptom management.
Yeah.
And in order to cure most diseases, you actually have to change the way that you think, and you've got to change your underlying behavior. And when it comes to the brain, your brain is almost like a toddler. It is completely out of control. Your brain desperately needs you to lead it. You are not your brain. You have a higher level of consciousness than your brain, right? You can decide what you're going to feed your brain, both in terms of the food you're feeding your body as well as the information you're giving. You can decide what you're going to teach your brain, right? Are you going to teach your brain a new skill like playing guitar or a new language? Or are you just going to feed it the same old nonsense that you've always been feeding it? that's all up to you. If you're toddler, if you have a child, and your child, I don't know, does something that potentially is harmful to their health, is it the child's fault, or is it because whatever adult in that child's life was not paying attention and leading that child in the moment the way that they should be?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, this is what I ends up thinking about is Jonathan Haidt's book is NYU professor has got this great book on the coddling of the American mind and kind of in this free range parenting type of deal with our kids.
Yep.
And I think about that for my own brain. Like I'm just assuming that whatever my brain tells me, it's like, well, I must know my mind, right? Oh, so yeah. Before we go on, this is a good one. What is the difference between, in your terms, in your world, the brain and the mind?
Oh, so this is a great question. I actually go through this in my course, right?
Okay.
So the brain is the actual organ. It's that structure that we just talked about.
Okay.
The cerebral hemispheres, right, which make up the neocortex, your midbrain, your cerebellum, and your brainstem. The actual structure, the organ, that is your brain. When I think about your mind, you can I define your mind as your brain in action. So as your brain working and processing.
Mm-hmm.
I describe your mind as not just the organ, right, of the brain, but your brain in action, but also your entire nervous system. And that includes your spinal cord, your nerves, which make up your peripheral nervous system. It includes your enteric nervous system, which are all the nerves in your gut.
Okay.
Right?
Oh,
So
gut reaction, things like that. This could.
That's because you've got nerves in your gut.
Interesting.
Like your gut is like your second brain, and they are attached anatomically as well as physiologically.
I want to come back to gut instincts and intuition. I think at a later time, because I'm joking, of course, on going with your gut, but that I'm like, what does that actually mean? But we'll come back to that. Let's keep going. Mind and brain. Yeah.
So your mind is your brain. It's your entire nervous system, including the peripheral nervous system, your entire nervous system. And it's about how your nervous system interacts with the environment around it, right? Including the body as well as your external environment. So without your brain, as we know it, your mind would not be what we know it to be. Without your the rest of your nervous system, peripheral and enteric nervous system, your mind would not be what we know it to be. Without the experiences that you've had, your mind would not be what we know it to be. And without the environment that it processes, both internal and external, your mind would not be what we know it to be.
So this is I mean, you're really making a case for my mind. So for my mind, if I take my mind as my brain plus, my spinal cord into my extremities, into my gut, you could make a case for, if you're going to be sitting down doing work all day, like make sure your feet are getting massaged at the same time as your hands are getting massaged, and your feet, like all of this, what you consider like really focused things on those areas, right? Like for the tips of your fingers, or making sure you're getting enough light, like whatever it is, right? You could make a case that is strengthening your mind.
So all those things you just mentioned, right? Your hands, your feet, your eyes, they're processing your senses, right?
Yeah.
Of sight, of touch, your tongue of taste, your nose of smell, your ears of hearing. All of that goes into formulating your mind.
So then I was trying to make it like easier, but now it's like everything is my mind, like walking.
Well, your body and your brain interpret everything.
Yeah.
Right.
I want an answer. I want a simpler answer, Philippe.
But if I put you in a completely different environment, right?
Yeah.
You may change your mind about something.
I've done that.
Right?
I know it. Right.
Why is that? Because now you're picking up different information. Your senses are picking up different information because you're in a different environment. I
just had this conversation. I was visiting a buddy last night in a different area of Florida, and he said he wants to move. And we had this whole conversation about, well, when you move, if you think things are going to change, they're not, because you're still going with you, as opposed, you know what I mean, as opposed to. But I could really see the opposite of that is, traveling for me has always been one of those things, right? Like
Yeah.
exploration, travel, new languages. I feel literally, I've said this before, I feel like a different person when I'm there, when I come back. Like, I just feel different. I feel like travel changes me, and I don't think that's oratory. I think that my brain changed or something happened. Have you seen that, or?
Absolutely. I mean, travel is really good because it sort of gives you a break from your normal life
Yeah.
and allows you to get a completely different experience because your senses are exposed to different things. And I remember a couple of years back, I heard this story about trying to plant a tree, right? And this tree, they stuck it in the soil. They, kept watering it. It was getting enough sunlight. They were taking care of it. No matter what they did, would not grow,
Mm.
right? And so a lot of people would be like, "Oh, well, that tree is a bad tree. Just be done with the tree." Well, the gardener decided to take the tree out and plant it, a few feet away.
Mm-hmm.
And there it grew because the soil was different. And so it's the same thing with people.
I like
Your
that.
environment has a huge impact on the way that you evolve and the way that you grow.
Let's do this. Because we could go, and I could do this for 5 hours. But let's do one more question tonight,
Yep.
and then we will, because I want to tie it into something we just said, and then we'll keep up with our videos, and we'll just keep this going. This is awesome. In a time of COVID, where travel, or just in general, if you can't travel, like
Yep.
right, and you're feeling maybe like you need to travel, your brain wants you to travel, you want to travel. What are some of the things that you can do at home, or that are ways of getting that same travel vibe, maybe for your brain that it craves, the different soil? Like, what are some of the ways that you can do that at home, remotely, that might not be always digital, right? Like, because we're sitting in front of our screens.
Yeah, and I think what the brain really craves is newness. It needs new experiences because new experiences create new neurons and new connections. It allows
Yeah.
our brains to evolve.
Yeah.
And so you can find different ways of doing that, right? So, I was before this essential call, I was on a call with a couple of other people
Mm.
where I said, look, in this pandemic, this is a great time to evolve,
Yeah.
to
You're right.
figure out what was working in your life beforehand and what wasn't working, and make the changes that you need to make in order to create the life that you want.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you can still do that at home. You can give yourself new experiences. You can teach yourself how to play a guitar or take an online course. You can, learn something you've always wanted to learn. You can learn a completely new language, right? You can learn about a completely different culture.
Yeah.
You can interact with people that you never would interact with.
Well, yeah, this is something that's exciting to me, and I think it's a really good point. We've become such consumers of information. Netflix, deliver my package to me, the news, where we're almost forget this newness means if you learn guitar, you can't just put a guitar in your hand and be like, hey, teach me guitar. We're not Matrix yet, right? You can't just
Right.
learn to fly a helicopter, which would be awesome, but
Right.
but until the day comes where we can get that euphoric feeling of newness from someone plugging into the back of my head, we have to do it. We have to do those things, right? We have to learn to play guitar or speak a language. And the consumption, the brain. So, okay, follow-up question. It's almost, what is the part of the brain that then likes me zoning out in front of Netflix or watching a football game, or because that's not really new. It's kind of expected, right?
Yeah, I think, look, there are moments where the brain needs rest also,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And the brain likes to be as efficient as possible. And so let's say you do learn something new.
Yeah.
When you're first learning it, it's really difficult, right? If it's a sport, you're like tripping over your feet. You're trying to remember the rules. You're trying to remember the form of whatever sport, right? But after months, all of a sudden, you're not even thinking about it anymore. You're just
Right.
out there doing, because your brain wants to be as efficient as possible.
Exactly. And yeah, go, please.
Yeah, and look, as much as your brain needs challenges, it also needs to rest, because during those periods of rest, that is when your brain is actually doing a lot of the healing and a lot of the evolving.
Yeah. Well, good. Healing and evolving. We will heal and evolve. This video series. Feels like a talk show host segue that they would say at like 7 in the morning after I have my coffee that's filled with bourbon. Welcome to the set. So this was great, Philippe. Where can we find you online? And how do we? Well, I'll keep saying this, and I'll include links as we go. But like, where do people follow you? What's the name of the site? How do they get in touch with you? How do they keep up with your reading? Buy your book? Things like that.
Yeah, so they can buy the book Neuroplasticity: Your Brain's Superpower on Amazon or Barnes & Noble.
Okay.
They can follow me on Instagram at philippe.md or Facebook at Philippe Dion, MD, LinkedIn Philippe Dion, MD, and the website is Inley Brain Fit Institute, www.INLE BRAINFIT Institute.com.
Got it. Okay. Well, I will include all this as I get better at all of the links and everything. So again, thank you. We'll come back to this. And a final one for all of us here. One of my favorite quotes, you said, starting something new is like really difficult sometimes, right? And there's this great quote from Alexis Ohanian, who I love, which is something like, sucking at something is the first step to kind of sort of being good at stuff in the future.
Absolutely.
I just like that. I mean, nobody wants to suck at things, but sometimes we suck at stuff in the beginning.
You need to suck at things. Then you appreciate it when you become great at it.
Exactly. Or just even a little marginally better.
That's right, yeah.
But the point is your brain will love it regardless, right? The point is your brain doesn't care if your brain is not saying, you suck at this. It's saying, thank you for challenging me and giving me something to do.
Listen, from the brain's perspective, there's no such thing as good or bad or suck or expertise.
Yeah.
Those are things that we place on ourselves.
You hear that? Your brain doesn't think you suck. That's the first person in your life. If I haven't said it, you don't suck. I'm talking to myself. All right, Philippe. Have a great night. Happy Sunday. And to be continued. We'll continue with this in the future.
Happy birthday to your dad.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Bye.